Well, here's where the nation's longest ever government shutdown stands today. Last night, enough senators were able to come together and pass a Republican-backed spending bill with help of 7 Democrats and 1 independent. Rand Paul of Kentucky was the only no vote from the GOP. Now the measure gets kicked to the House, which has been on recess since mid-September. Speaker Mike Johnson urged lawmakers to start returning to Washington, D.C. right now. But the earliest a vote is expected is Wednesday afternoon. President Trump has signaled support for the bill, saying yesterday he expects the government to be back open very quickly. Time now to bring in NBC's Alice Barr in Washington, D.C. And Alice, so far, the Speaker wants the vote to happen as fast as possible, but he doesn't have much wiggle room to work with here, right?
Yeah, he only can afford to lose 2 House Republicans and still get this passed. And that is, in fact, because there's about to be a new Democrat in the House. Adelita Grijalva, an Arizona Democrat who won a special election last month, but has not actually been sworn in yet, as the House has been in recess and the government has been shut down. And that delay, in fact, has been getting a lot of attention about why she's not yet been sworn in. She does narrow the margins even more so in the very narrowly divided House. So that's one element here. They have only 2 votes that they can lose among House Republicans, because Democrats have made it clear that they are going to unite to oppose this legislation, specifically because it does not contain anything to curb rising health care costs, as we've been speaking about. But it does appear, specifically with that endorsement from President Trump, that he wants to see the government reopen, that he thinks this bill is going to make it happen. That's a pretty big deal with House Republicans and is likely to set this on a decent glide path for approval, potentially by as early as tomorrow afternoon, which would then open the government up by potentially as early as tomorrow night.
All right. Talk to me about this group of senators that broke rank and crossed the aisle. What was it about this specific group of lawmakers to side with the GOP?
Yeah, they're an interesting group to watch. First of all, they are moderates, 7 moderate Democrats, 1 independent who caucuses with Democrats. And they're people who, by and large, if you look at their records, they're not big shutdown people. One of them, Tim Kaine, represents Virginia, an area that has been particularly hit hard by the shutdown in terms of furloughed workers, in terms of workers being threatened with being laid off during the shutdown. And then really critically here, none of these 8 senators that crossed over and voted with the Republicans is up for re-election anytime soon. I think that tells you a lot about the fact that Democrats were in a bind. They did not see this as a politically winning move to have to cross over, to have to vote with Republicans to reopen the government. And so nobody who was at risk of being up for election soon did that. But there was still this undercurrent of understanding that they were not getting anywhere really substantial with their efforts to try to tie health care provisions to a vote to reopen the government. Republicans were not budging on that, and that is what we have heard from the moderates who crossed over. So this particular group, I think, felt politically protected enough to do what they felt was necessary to protect Americans who were being hurt in the shutdown.
Yeah, President Trump said he'd sign it, right? And then then the fight goes on to a fight over health care. How serious is the White House and Republicans on the Hill about working with Democrats on things after they open up?
So what has been promised by the top Republican in the Senate Majority Leader John Thune, is that there will be a vote by the 2nd week in December. And so that will happen before the Obamacare Affordable Care Act tax cuts. Those subsidies expire at the end of the year. And that expiration is what is going to trigger these potentially doubling, tripling insurance premium prices for Americans. And so there's going to be a vote, but there's no guarantee that it's going to pass in the Senate, and there's no guarantee it's going to be picked up in the House. House Speaker Mike Johnson was asked about that, and he said he'll have a deliberative process with House Republicans, but there are no promises they'll take it up. So it certainly remains an open question. Chesley.
All right, Alice, thanks so much for everything. Really appreciate you.